back at the Schubert house.
もういいってどういうことですか、シューバルトさん。
君に依頼した調査はもう打ち切りということだ。
I mean, he's got his son,
待ってくだ
right?
さい。確かにカール・ノイマンの調査は終わりました。彼はあなたの息子だった。
君には感謝しているよ。
Can he leave it?
お茶が入りました、お父さん。
お父さん。
そうか。
こんにちは。
ご苦労だった。請求書を回してくれたまえ。
He's not done just yet. He's not. It's not in his nature, is it?
ヨハンも来ていますよ。
そうか。ヨハンも来ているのか。
Richard? He must have heard that, right?
誰も寄せつけない、誰も信じない氷のような男が、息子が見つかったことで、もう
Careful, Richard.
どうするもんかね。あの映画を、とてもバイエルンの吸血鬼と呼ばれた男とは思う。
But things can change though, Richard.
そうか、ヨハンも来ているのか。その点は大丈夫です。
その点、他に何か気になることでもあるのかね。
Ooh.
いや、時間に余裕ができたもんで、つまらんことをやってしまうんです。
Do tell?
刑事時代に作っていた私的なスクラップブックを見ちまうんですよ。
Unsolved
未解
cases,
決
eh?
だった事件のね。
で、それを見るとどんな気分だい？
悔しいですよ。あの殺人事件、この殺人事件。
Yeah, imagine being in
まだ
that
このシャバで
position.
のうのうと暮らしていると思うと、なんともやりきれないですよ。自分の能力のなさにね。
能力はあった。ただリヒャルト、あんたは必死になるあまり、事件と自分を同一化しすぎた。
There's a fine balance in that job, in that line of work.
フラストレーションとなり。
酒に走った。
だがわしは別に悪いことだとは思わんよ。昔の事件のスクラップを眺めることさ。
またもどかしくなるだけですよ。
いや、もう大丈夫だ。今の視線でそれらを眺めることで何が思い浮かぶか話してほしい。
from different
あんたは
perspective,
酒によっ
perhaps.
てあの連続殺人鬼の少年を撃ち殺した。今やその事実に正面から向き合う準備が
Yeah, come back at it.
だがまだ引き金を引いたとき、何を考えたか思い出すことから逃げている。まだ見るんだろう、あの少年の亡
Yeah,
霊
he's good.
を。
A ghost from his past.
すべてを明らかに、すべてを白日のもとにさらすとき、その亡霊も消えるさ。
I fear the ghost might go away, but so might he, though. Right? It might go away altogether. Oh. Oh. Yeah. Train shots like these ones make me uneasy. Oh. Okay. Great sound design.
すべてを白日のもとにさらすか。
Interesting scene, that one.
会計士ホルマー殺人事件。
Holmar the
被
accountant.
害者ヨアヒム・ホルマーは着実にキャリアを積み、誰からも恨みを買うような人間ではなかった。それがめった雑誌、物取りの形跡もない。
So it was
神の
targeted?
声殺人事件。被害者は元家政婦と運転手。どちらの犯行現場にも壁に
Hey, I've seen writing like that before.
メッセージが殴り書きされていた。
I've seen that kind of writing before. It's not a coincidence, is it?
殺人事件。バイエルン州でも有数の資産家ルート・ガウク氏が
Rudy, oh, another Rudy.
死体で発見された。
Forced.
イザール川上流で中年夫婦の水死体が上がる。一連の中年夫婦連続殺人事件の線で捜査。重要参考人の日本人医師は未だ逃走中。未解決事件の数だけ酒の量も増えていった。だが今はあの時とは違う。
Yeah, he's got a different perspective.
なるほど。先生の言う通りだ。酒を飲まずに考えるとはこういうことか。ちょっと待て。
Oh, a moment of clarity, perhaps.
よく考え。
Is that his ghost, or is that actually a person? Oh, it's the ghost. Oh. A lot of interesting details there.
何を思いついたんだ。
いや、それなんですよ。何か思い浮かんだんですが。
少年の亡霊が見えて、
Flash of insight,
その
yeah,
ひら
moment
め
of
きが
clarity.
すっ飛んじまったか。
あの未解決事件のどれかを解く何か重要な
He probably connected something. Was that
気のせいか。
another footstep, or is he imagining it? But it's got that echoey sound effect on it, so it's tough to tell if it's the real deal or if he is having one of those episodes.
あの時と同じだ。
There's a bit of paranoia
あの時も
leaking
こ
in.
うしてロジを奴を追って。
Or he's gonna see him again.
こんな夜中にすみません先生。
いや、君が全てを語る気になったんだ。
あの時私は少年の中に見たんです。この世に存在することを知ったんです。
It.
本当の悪が。だから
True evil. Yeah, it does exist.
私はあの少年を撃ち殺したんです。この前ふと頭に浮かんだこと。私の抱えていたあのいくつもの未解決事件は実は一つの事件だったんです。
ドクター・ギーレン。先日君が送ってくれた君の著書、超越犯罪心理学。
Do I know that name?
興味深く読ませてもらった。デュッセルドルフ大学で私が教鞭をとっていた頃の教え子が
Maybe I do know that name.
こうして活躍していることを非常に喜んで。
Oh, I think I just saw Tenma. Oh, it's Rudy. Oh, I love that, how it's all connected.
以前君が話してくれた連続殺人犯
ユルゲンス
ユルゲンスとの面接の際、あの時ユルゲンスはある友人に命令されて殺人を犯したと君に語った。
If he can get that name.
私の記憶が定かでないため、もう一度教えてはくれないだろう
You
か。
can see Tenma's black hair.
ユルゲンスの語ったその
There it
友
is.
人の名前を。
If he gets that information, and then if Richard gets that information, then you're on thin ice, Richard. Then you really have to be careful.
君は大学時代非常に優秀な学生であったが、
There was another, though.
まさし
Yeah.
く首席を競い合うほど優秀な学生がいた。脳外科医としての道を進んだが、今や連続殺人事件の重要参考人。彼のことで少しでも君の知っていることを教えてほしい。
Rudy knows quite a bit about him.
果たして今どこにいるのか。
Yeah, I saw the black flow.
天馬という男は。
I miss him, man. I do.
もう4年も経って警察も捜査に力を入れてく
I
れ
like
ま
this.
せん
It's
し
putting us in his shoes, essentially, right?
確かお母さん以前にあの大富豪の家政婦。
Oh, there's connections. Okay. Oh, yeah.
でももう20年も前のことです。
辞められたのは何か理由があって。
当
20
時
years ago.
体を壊しまして、母は詩を読むのが好きで、シューバルトさんがまだ目が見えていた頃、よく2人で朗読し合ったって。
Is that right?
母の思い出なのでずっと取ってあるんです。この
Oh,
本棚の詩集はすべて、
Mm,
シューバ
yeah,
ルト
quite
さ
the
んが母
collection
にプ
there.
レゼントしてくださったものです。
so they had quite the connection as well.
ドルナッハ社社長殺人事件の元担当刑事
Right, they mentioned the
今
CEO
じゃ探
earlier.
偵とはね。
Oh, look at this
社
dude.
長の元秘書であるあなたにもう一度伺いたいんです。
社長の敵そんなもの数え上げたらキリがないと言ったでしょう。ガウク社長に倒産させられた企業のリストは警察がとっくに分析している
Oh,
はずですよ。
bankrupt, eh?
バイエルン州の有力な資産家といえばもう一人いますね。
シューバルト氏ですか。
I mean, naturally rivals, right?
そりゃもうライバルでしたよ。生涯かけたね。
And he mentioned
あなた
bankrupt.
ご存知かね。シューバルトは過去に2度倒産を経
Yeah,
験
they
してい
told
ま
us
す
as
がね
much a few episodes ago.
2度目の倒産はガウク社長との熾烈な企業競争の
Oh,
結
yeah.
果なんですよ。
That's a rival.
彼らは唯一対等に言い合える仲だった。あれは
Unique
ライバルという
situation
よ
or
り
positions to be in.
実は友人だったんですよ。
Okay, that changes it yet again. Okay, I mean, of course, there's a clear connection here to Schubert, but it's like piece by piece. Okay, yeah, he's not imagining that. Okay.
気をつけろ。
Coincidence or
ああ、ハンスか。よ
Yeah,
く
there's a
知ってたよ。神の声殺人事件とかで殺された二人のうちの一人。
right, the driver
いいや
and
つ
the
だったの
housekeeper,
に
was
かわ
it?
いそうによ。
Oh, they already showed the housekeeper, right?
彼は以前シューバルトのところで
The
運
driver.
転手をしていました。
This is beginning to feel like the wolf, how he
らし
was
いな。でももう30年も前の話だぜ。
30 years ago.
なぜクビになったか知ってますか？
それはシューバルトがその頃破産したからだよ。
別に何かトラブルがあったわけじゃ。
いいか、ハンスの名誉のために言っとくがな。やつはあのクソったれの大金持ちだろうが、俺たちみたいな貧乏だろうが、
Yeah, it's beginning to feel a lot like the wolf.
気持ちのいい男だったんだ。
You know,
やつはよく言ってたよ。
isolating the
あの
wolf.
金持ちにバードウォッチングを教えたな。自分だって。森に連れて行くと吸血鬼どころ
Oh,
か
it's gotta be that
子供みたいに
forest.
喜んでたとよ。
Oh, I love these exterior shots.
いまだに夫のことが思い出されて、夫は真面目一本な人で、誰からも恨まれるようなことはありませんでした。あんな殺され方を。
お察しします。確かご主人は。
はい、幼い頃施設で過ごして、
Oh,
里親の元を転々として苦労の末会計士に。
ご主人はシューバルト氏から顧問会計士の依頼を受けていましたね。
あの人とはお金に対する哲学が違うって犯人は捕まるでしょうか。
努力します。絶対に捕まります。
Richard, my guy. Ooh. I like him so much, but thin ice.
ご主人と彼が知り合うきっかけは何だったのかご存知ですか？
森であったって。
Yeah, it's that forest. It's that forest.
まだシューバルトさんの目が見える頃ですわ。バードウォッチングです。それから何度も
Yeah,
ご
it's
一
all
緒させていただい
connected.
て
All connected. It's all coming together.
バードウォッチング。子供みたいに喜ぶ。二人で朗読し合った。
Yeah. It's coming together. It's coming together. Okay. This can't be a coincidence anymore.
大丈夫かいっていうより、まるであんたを狙ってたみたいだぜ、ありゃ。
Yeah, it certainly seems like it. Twice now he's had these near-death experiences.
私が刑事時代抱えていたいくつもの事件は全て同じ方向を向いていました。神の声殺人事件、ドルナッハ社社長殺人事件、会計士殺人
All
事件。
connected to Schubert,
一見何の結びつきもないこれらの事件。
but severed one by one.
犯行の手口もバラバラ。これらはある一点でつながっていた。全部の事件の被害者の死は全てシューバルトを孤独にするためのものだったんです。
Just like the wolf.
そしてもう一つ奇妙な共通点が、ドルナッハ社社長殺人事件で犯行の直前、ガウフ社長は重要な商談があると言って出かけていった。その商談の相手
Oh, did he get a
の名前、
response?
そして神の声殺人事件の犯人が壁に書いた神の名前、そして私の抱えていた事件の中で唯一無関係に見える中年夫婦連続殺人事件。その重要参考人の日本人医師が取り調べの際、語った犯人の名前、それら全ては共通の名前。
ヨハン。
He got the response.
私の元教え子の犯罪心理学者がある友人の命令で犯行を犯した殺人犯の研究をしていた。
Did that ring a
手
bell,
紙で知
Richard?
らせてくれたよ。その友人の名もヨハン。
The build-up.
ありふれた名だ。それぞれの事件のつながり
I
も
love
想
this.
像の域を出ない。もしこれが事実だとすると、4年もかかって計画的に連続殺人を行うヨハンと名乗る何者かがシューバルトを完全な孤独に追い込んだということになる。
シューバルトの息子を産んだマルゴット・ランガーは死に、
シューバルトの息子を語ったファーレンという学生も実の
Out of the
息子の
picture.
出現で都合よく自殺した。もし実在するとして、
Oh, Richard's heard about him recently.
そのヨハンは
Yeah, Richard. You know.
ヨハンも来ているのか。
とっても。
シューバルトのすぐ近くに。
Oh. You know, that's one of the best episodes of the series so far. Oh, I love that. Right then, yeah, I mean, that is legitimately one of the best episodes of the series. Certainly for me, at least. Maybe, yeah, I should say in my opinion, because, it is the type of episode or, opinion, I suppose, that could be highly subjective, right? The approach, rather, of this episode specifically. It's not, I can see how this might not be for everyone, right? Even the actual subject matter of the episode itself, right? Really quite focused on Richard, right? I mean, Richard's been the focal point for a few episodes now, but this one specifically really puts us in his shoes, doesn't it? And by putting us, the audience, in his shoes, right, in his mind as much as possible, it really builds on that psychological horror aspect of it. I mean, there's a really distinct approach here. The really specific shots, a lot of times I like to call it the stalker shot, right? It's essentially shots of, it's a perspective of Richard from behind on many occasions throughout the episode, right? Again, it plays its part in kind of heightening that tension, right? That atmosphere, that oppressive atmosphere of this episode. And of Richard's world altogether. His world feels oppressive, doesn't it? And then, of course, you bring in some of these incidents that are happening. Many of those incidents perhaps can be chalked up to paranoia, right? You certainly get to see some of Richard's PTSD on display in this episode. But also, there's a few incidents that, are not paranoia, that aren't things that he's imagining. The most distinct of all of these incidents is the truck driver. You have a third party essentially who's saying that, it looked like that truck driver is targeting you. So, at that point, it's not paranoia anymore. And, even the steel beam from the top of the building, yes, maybe something's at play here and he is being targeted, right? More on that later, but there's still a chance that could have been a coincidence. Right? It's quite the coincidence, but it could have been. It could have been, right? And especially if you look at it from this character's perspective. So alongside Richard, us, the audience, is also really hyper aware of everything, of his surroundings, of anything that might seem a little bit sketchy, right? The moment you get that shot from behind, the moment you're at a train station, again, it's a textbook setup, but the moment I get that shot from behind and there's a train approaching, immediately, as an audience member, I tense up. I'm like, whoa, hold on. And then, of course, that whole setup is used to build that tension. But beyond it possibly just being paranoia, I actually kind of look at it as Richard kind of being intuitive, right? That Richard is able to kind of see that, there is this invisible hand that's closing in on him. And of course, the invisible hand being Johan. Listen, folks, as you saw, over the span of the past two episodes now, especially this episode, I keep saying, okay, I really like Richard, but, he's on thin ice. He's knocking on all the right doors, unfortunately for him, because now by the end of this episode, he's put it together. I mean, it's really quite impressive that he has. You could even argue that he's been a bit more impressive than Lunge, even though, of course, it's not as clear cut as that, right? It kind of comes down to the approach as well, because Lunge is kind of getting mixed in. I don't know. He's kind of mixing in his own theories as well. So he's coming at it from a perspective of, wanting his theories to be correct. But now, a sober Richard has really, really kind of, put it all together, right? So, Richard is really quite the impressive, investigator, right? And again, I love the intel gathering in this episode, the slow burn. Oh man. I mean, the thing is, the impressive thing about that to me is that, it's a 22-minute episode, but it actually felt like it was longer. It felt like a scene out of a movie. And again, highly subjective. It might not be for everyone. The pacing of it, the really deliberate pacing of it, him gathering all of that intel, kind of going back to those cases. But I feel that in utilizing this approach, you also really kind of help establish the lived-in world of this anime. I feel that this deliberate pacing really helps in fleshing out these characters, even these one-episode characters, some of these loved ones that he's going to. And I love the use of the town itself, the establishing shots of the town he's in, or the street, or the area he might be in. I just love it. It's one of the signature shots of this episode and, of the anime as a whole. You get a lot of fantastic establishing shots right? Be it a train station, be it the outside of a house, be it a street. And, one of the really common ones or the reoccurring ones of this arc so far is the Schubert residence, right? The mansion. I've seen that so many times at this point. But yeah, it begins at that mansion and it ends at that mansion, essentially, as Richard thinks back to Johann, right? It does ring a bell. Unfortunately for Richard, it does ring a bell. And, now, yeah, it does feel inevitable, doesn't it? That, sooner or later, Johann himself is going to have to take it into his own hands, because now Richard is really picking up steam, right? He's put everything together. So it'll be interesting. It'll be really quite interesting to see how Richard, decides to proceed, right? Because he is going to proceed now that he knows that it's that Johann. Yes, his sensei, his therapist, whose name I didn't really quite get yet. Maybe I did. I think maybe I don't know. Did I get it? I'm not sure. But yeah, his therapist, he floated the idea that, it's a common name. Johann's a common name, but, the fact that Richard knows that there is a Johann that is close to them already, that is close to Schubert already, it's just too much to chalk up as a coincidence, as a common name, right? He knows there's a Johann There's a Johann that made it in. Not only made it in, he is essentially Schubert's right-hand man at this point. It's all by design. This whole idea of isolating Schubert over the last few years by eliminating all of these connections that he's made, right? One by one, he's severed all of those connections. And, like I said, it's really beginning to feel really quite similar to the Wolf and how he was isolated. But again, the strategic element of each approach is a bit different. Yes, both are being isolated, but in this case, in this really specific case of Schubert, it's more so to establish himself, and by himself I mean Johann, as the only one he can rely on, as the one person, right, that he can go to and always have in his side, by his corner, his right-hand man, right? I think that is the goal here. That is the reason for isolating Schubert. But of course, for the Wolf, it was more so about sending a message, about, isolating him to make him feel like he is this nameless person, right? That he's the last one left alive, right? There's a bit of a difference in strategies. But before I move on, I kind of want to go back to, my point about the approach, right? The production side of things, the technical side of things, be it the camera angles, the really deliberate camera movement, the sound design, right? The voice acting, all of it, the sound mixing, everything. I thought it was just so effective in putting us in in Richard's shoes, in his mind space, in his head space. I just loved it. But how about that scene right at the conclusion of the episode, right? Richard and his sensei bringing it all together, tying it all up, right? Of course, a bit of outside help comes in clutch as well. You bring in a few characters from the past, right? You tie it all together. Everyone is kind of connected, as it becomes quite clear that, Richard's therapist, his sensei, is also someone who's been in the lives of some of these other characters. People like Dr. Tenma. I see a much younger photo of Dr. Tenma, right? I saw that in Rudy's flashback, right? In the last time I saw Rudy. It was a great episode. It was a great introduction to a new character. But yeah, it all ties up nicely, or connected quite nicely, because, Rudy used to be one of the students, right? Alongside Dr. Tenma as well. And he gives him that confirmation, essentially, right? The name, Johann, that name that comes up quite a bit. But, the thing is, the letter that Rudy sent back, there's a strong possibility that indeed he did explain everything about Tenma that he recently learned. I mean, not recently, I suppose the last time he actually ran into Tenma, right, in that episode, because the therapist, sensei, asked for it, right? He asked about any possible information that he might have about Tenma. So, it's possible that he wrote to him all about this, that, Tenma's innocent. He's being framed for this. So there's another interesting angle to look at, right? But it's not quite mentioned. So it's still kind of a possibility at this point. It all kind of depends on if Rudy believes that the therapist, his old sensei, is someone he can trust. I mean, us, the audience, knows he can be trusted, but, Rudy has to be really quite careful with this information, of course, right? But, of course, an interesting angle to kind of look at down the line, perhaps in the near future. But for now, the focus is certainly on him and Richard, kind of just tying it all up together. But yeah, even though I'm really quite concerned for Richard at this point, and potentially even the sensei, I must admit, I'm really quite not excited. I'm really quite interested in seeing how Johan is going to approach this, right? How he's going to go after Richard. Because surely he is about to go after him, right? Sooner rather than later, because Richard is really, really, really dialed in at this point, right? He's really beginning to figure everything out at this point. So yeah, his approach is going to be quite interesting. I mean, listen, surely at this point, of course, he already knows about Richard, right? He knows that, this investigator comes in. I mean, he's there, on that day, he was there as well. Johan, that is, on the day Richard is told that, just give up, the investigation is now closed as far as Schubert's concerned, right? And, there's an interesting scene there. He sees this newfound relationship between Schubert and his son Carl, right? You kind of have to, look at it from Richard's perspective as well, in terms of how he must be, looking at this, right? Given that he has his own daughter that he would love to reconnect with, but unfortunately for him, it feels like something that's quite impossible at the moment, right? So, it's an interesting dynamic. You see that somehow, I mean, I say somehow, but, mainly because of, or largely because of Johan, Schubert is reunited with his son, right? It's kind of like a needle in a haystack type situation. Yeah, you have Richard, who knows all about his daughter. He knows his daughter's right there, right? But he's not able to reconnect, right? So there's really quite an interesting contrast there. But yeah, in terms of Johan knowing about Richard, I'm sure he's done his research. I'm sure he already knows a few things that he can exploit, right? Us, the audience, knows a few things that Johan can possibly exploit and target. And also, I kind of get my answer. I get my confirmation that indeed Johan has been at it for some time now, as far as Schubert goes, right? I mean, it goes so much further back as well. And, in terms of isolating Schubert over the last few years, the death of the other CEO, the rival CEO, I mean, that one right there, in that CEO, he had someone who really truly understood how, Schubert might feel, because, both of these people find themselves in really, really unique and isolating positions as CEOs, as really, really successful men, titans of industry, but titans stand above all, right? Isolated from the rest. And, in each other, they had a friend. I love that. I really love that aspect of it. But, in eliminating the CEO as well, once again, it really so effectively, truly isolated Schubert. But yeah, unfortunately for Richard, once again, he is going to get to see true evil, right? As he tells Sensei a little bit earlier in the episode, on that day, he saw that it existed. True evil does exist, right? And he proceeds to shoot the young man. But of course, he ends up doing it under the influence. So that ends up landing him in a lot of trouble, right? But yeah, as much as I like Richard and I've enjoyed this focus on Richard, unfortunately, now it's just kind of, it really truly feels like a matter of time, doesn't it? It really truly feels like Johan is about to take this situation into his own hands, right? So I'm excited, man. I'm really quite excited for the next episode. And if you enjoyed this, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. If you are interested in full length or full opacity, consider checking out the Patreon page. The links are in the description and the pinned comment. And there's also links to social media if that's your thing. Right then, thank you so much for joining me, folks, and thank you for your time, because time is precious. It really is. And I do hope to see you again soon for episode 29. Until then, take it easy.